Okay, so this will probably be a long video, and I'm a slow talker, so you might want to put it at 1.5 the speed, just to help you get through a long video. But this is part 3 of a series about my brain damage. So part 1 was roads, part 2 was words, and this part 3 is school. So it probably would help if you watch them in order, but it's not really necessary. I'm trying to make it so you can watch each part separately and not have to watch them in order. And also, each one covers the same time periods, but they cover different aspects of how my brain damage affects me in my life. Okay, so I'm in my early 50s right now, and my brain damage, I received it at around age 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm not going to get specific about that. Don't want to, dox myself or put information out there that's too private. I'm going to try to be really circumspect about a lot of this information. So anyways, and people had heard that in this video there was going to be a bunch of criticism of affirmative action, what they call diversity or DEI now, but they called it affirmative action back then. And that will be later on in the video. Most people who criticize affirmative action criticize it because they feel like the ones that were personally hurt by it, like me. Most of them that criticize it because they feel they were passed over in favor of other people. But my particular criticism is not that. So affirmative action, it was supposed to help me as a woman and as a disabled person, but instead it harmed me greatly. Not because I was passed over for other people, but because I was overpraised, and because of that overpraised, I was basically tricked into doing some things I probably should not have done. But anyways, that'll be much later in the video. To go back to the beginning, first I want to talk about the ground rules, how I operate this channel and how I disclose information about myself. So if you already know the ground rules, there'll be a time on the screen that you can use to skip past the ground rules because you already know them. So anyways, in order to protect my privacy and the privacy of those in my life, my friends, relatives, coworkers, people from my past, all names, dates, and places have been changed, including my own name. Penny Bloomfield is not my real name, and in fact, Penny Bloomfield is a fictional character that I use to represent myself. So when I have personal stories about myself like this one, you can count on about 95% of the information being true. So what you're about to hear is a slightly fictionalized personal story about myself, the real person behind Penny Bloomfield, the real person that owns this YouTube channel. So with the 95% rule, I'm trying to use that as a way to tell highly authentic personal stories about myself, and still remain private and concealed, and also, all the other people in this story remain private and concealed. And so anyways, only about 5% of the details will be changed. Penny Bloomfield, you might think of her as a filter. So I am the real person, and information that is 100% true, I put it through this filter called Penny Bloomfield, who is a fictional character, and when it comes out and it reaches you, it's at about a 95% true level. So that's what I'm doing. However, when we're dealing with medical issues, which can be really controversial, there are some extra rules that I put in place here. So anything that would be really controversial, I have some extra rules about how much I can change it and all that kind of stuff. So about the medical issues, 100% of the medical issues that I tell you about are true about me, the real person behind Penny Bloomfield. I'm not going to make up a medical issue that I do not have and tell it to you. I might conceal ones that I don't have. I do have multiple medical issues, and I think I'm probably going to conceal some of them. I haven't decided if I'll tell about them yet. But the brain damage is one that I am revealing, and the brain damage is 100% real. I really do have brain damage, and some of the details of these stories will be changed, but the main stuff in the stories, 95% of it is all true. And in particular, I'm not going to make any medical issues worse than they actually are in real life. I'll probably downplay them a little bit, but I will not make any of them worse. So whatever you see in this video, if you're like, oh, that's pretty bad, I bet it was exaggerated a little bit. No, it wasn't exaggerated at all. If anything, it was downplayed a little bit. Okay, so now that we're done with the ground rules, I wanted to talk about how my brain damage affected my time in school. And this would be middle school, junior high, high school, and college. And so I already covered a little bit of the school aspect in part 2 of my brain damage series, Words, where I talked about how extremely hard it is for me to pick up a foreign language or deal with changing terminology within English, which is my only language. I am an American. And I talked about how a high school teacher helped me in a foreign language class that I was failing very badly in high school by basically allowing me unlimited extra credit. So anyways, I have discussed a little bit of school issues in my brain damage part 2, Words, but not very much, just a tiny little bit. So most of the school stuff will be in this video. So anyways, in that video, my brain damage part 2, Words, I used a chart with different stages shown. So stage 1, ultra nightmare hard mode, first 2 years after my injury. Stage 2, from 2 years to 10 years. And these are just sort of rough categories I created myself. So with Words, I went through various levels of difficulty, and I gradually healed over the decades. And a lot of the healing was early on. The brain, when it is damaged at a young age, it's much more likely to have the ability to heal. But I also think that calling it healing, the vast improvements that have happened in my functioning, calling it healing is a little bit of an inaccuracy, I think, because I'm not really sure if all of it's healing. A lot of it is not healing, but just using my brain in a different way to get, the same or similar results that I used to get before my brain damage. It's kind of like if you think there's like a path that you normally walk through the woods, and at some point there's a landslide that completely obliterates the path and you can't go that way anymore. And then you figure out, oh, well, there isn't really a path around this, but I can kind of make a path around this. And I kind of feel like that's like a lot of what has happened with my brain damage. Like I learned techniques, I learned strategies, I learned to sort of guess what my brain is likely to do and sort of figure out a way around that behavior. Sometimes I'm able to set certain rules for myself that actually work on getting rid of some of the symptoms so that I can create a similar output to normal people. So I think some of it is healing, and some of it is just learning to use what I've got in a different way. So anyways, so with schooling, so with words, it improved vastly. I went through these various stages, and there was enormous effort involved over the years. For example, in the early years, I might have been reading dictionaries for about an hour a day. It was there was a lot of effort put in, but I improved a lot, and with school, I did improve, but I also didn't improve. With school, it was different. It wasn't so much about stages. The first 2 years were really hard, but after the first 2 years, it was this weird combination of extremely hard and extremely easy. But it would be very random, so I couldn't really tell. So certain classes or college courses might be extremely hard for me, or they might be extremely easy for me. And even like within a class, like certain exams or certain projects or certain pieces of homework might be extremely hard, and others might be extremely easy for reasons that I did not understand. And it was just often seemed quite random. Anyways, in order to explain this well, I've got a whole bunch of notes in front of me, and I want to go back to before my brain damage, so I can kind of do a comparison to before brain damage Penny and after brain damage Penny. And I'm just going to pause here briefly so I can drink some water and cough. Okay, so before my brain damage, I was very, very intelligent. School was super easy, and one of the talents that I had before my brain damage was that people could read to me maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs was my limit. They could just open up any book and they could read to me 2 or 3 paragraphs, or like a newspaper article or anything like that. And I would not look at what they were reading. I would just hear them read it, and then I could repeat it back to them word for word. And it was about 2 or 3 paragraphs that was my limit. And I could do that with anything. So hearing it once, and I had it memorized, at least for, a little while. I didn't have multiple, things in my mind at any particular time that were that long, although I did have a lot of Bible verses in my mind. So at church, there were 3 different churches of my childhood. I've talked about them a little bit before, and I'm not going to really reveal what denominations they were exactly, but, pretty close. 2 of them were pretty mainstream, normal Protestant ones, and then the third one was kind of weird, but we didn't go there very much. But anyways, at these churches, they knew me for being able to memorize a lot of Bible verses, which is one of the things that they like to do, have kids do in Sunday school, especially the older kids, is memorize Bible verses. And and I actually knew I could quote pieces of the Bible at people in church, and sometimes I'd hear them quote it wrongly, and I'd be like, no, it actually says blah blah blah. And at most of these churches, it was King James Bible and Good News Bible were the ones that were used the most, but there were also some other ones. But all of that went away instantly when I got my brain damage. Like, I could not repeat 2 or 3 paragraphs of stuff that I'd heard for the first time back at people. I couldn't do that anymore. And I didn't have a whole bunch of Bible verses memorized. In fact, after my brain damage, I had this little keychain where I had my favorite Bible verses laminated and on that keychain because I could not remember them anymore. Yeah, I couldn't remember them anymore. So I had them laminated and on that keychain. And so I went from, and of course, when you can memorize 2 or 3 paragraphs of information word for word, and much larger amounts of information you can remember, like the basic summary of them, just from reading at once, it means that elementary school is extremely easy. And it was. When I was a kid, I just like, whenever we'd have any kind of test, I'd get 100%, like pretty much every time, 100%. And I'd talk to the other kids and I'd be like, why aren't you doing well? It's just stuff that was in the chapter of the book that we all just read, and it was pretty simple stuff from that chapter too. They weren't asking anything complicated. It was just like, what are the basic ideas from this chapter? So I had not a good understanding of why the other kids couldn't do as well as I did in school, and I was called a genius sometimes. I'm not sure how exactly how smart I was, but I do know that at one point when I was a child, there were some people who were trying really hard to convince my parents that I needed to go far away to a boarding school for geniuses, and it would all be paid for. My parents wouldn't have to try to pay for it or anything. And I did not want to go. I was like, no, I want to stay on the farm. And they agreed. They didn't think about it very much. They were mostly on my side. But I was like, no way that I can live at a boarding school away from my brothers and sisters and all my relatives and my parents. And no, that was a big no. And just, I grew up on a farm in the American Midwest, and really lovely farm, just loved it so much, just in love with the farm, and definitely did not want to leave the farm and go to some boarding school. So anyways, I was pretty smart, possibly even at genius level. And after I got my brain damage, school, it became like when I would take an exam, like the average exam would be at about the same level as an average person. Like, if the average person was getting a 70%, I'd probably get a 70%. But there were some things in school that I was extremely good at. I would just be so good, and teachers would praise me for how good I was. And then there were other things that I would be so bad at, and teachers would be like, I know you're smart. Why are you doing so badly? And even the ones, in both high school and college and so on that knew about my brain damage, even those, they often thought that I was trolling them or joking with them or doing badly on purpose or something, with how very bad some of my work was. They'd be like, oh, you're really smart, you do this good work, and then you did that super bad work. So some classes would be easy all the way through. Everything would be easy. Some classes would be super hard, and some classes would be easy, and then I'd have some super hard stuff in them. And there would be projects or homework in even in easy classes that was just garbage. I mean, I'd be like doing really well in the class, and then there'd be some project or some exam that I just could not do. And oftentimes I couldn't understand why I had done it so badly. I was like, oh. And a lot of times I was able to look at the project and evaluate, oh, I should not turn in this piece of homework because it'll actually be worse than turning in nothing at all. So I would desperately try to fix it right up until the deadline, and then ask for extensions on the deadline and stuff like that. And what happened is that in high school, I nearly did not graduate from high school. So I was in honors courses and remedial courses at the same time. in some of the high schools that I went to, and because I did run away from home, and I was going from cousin's place to cousin's place to grandparents' place for a while in the later high school and during some of the early college years. So but yeah, I remember being in honors courses and remedial courses at the same time in high school, and I had a terrible grade point average. And people would say, the teachers would say, you're so smart. Why do you do so badly sometimes? And in high school, you can't just like withdraw from a course. So one of the strategies that I used in college to get by better was that I would, when I realized that I was doing really badly in a class and I was sure to flunk it, I would withdraw. And if I usually was able to realize that fast enough that I could withdraw and get my money back, or not get my money back, but at least I wouldn't have an F recorded. I'd just have a W, or I'd have no record of me even having taken the course, depending on how early I managed to withdraw. But sometimes I wasn't clear on how badly I was doing, or I thought I could turn it around, and I would stay in the course in college, and I would get a terrible grade. I would get a D or an F, and then it would bring down my grade point average. So I had a lot of grade point average problems in high school and in college. And in college, I was able to mitigate them to some extent by a bunch of strategies. So not just withdrawing from courses when I knew I wasn't doing well, but also I would do this stuff where, so I should tell you that this is a little bit embarrassing. I went to college for about 15 years. I graduated from high school on time. I didn't have to take a longer time with that, but on college, I went there for about 15 years. And now it's true that I would go, I would drop out, and then I would go, and then I would drop out. So not 15 years solidly. And a lot of times when I was in there, I was only taking 1 or 2 courses at a time, because I had seen what happened when I tried to take anything like a full course load, and how very, very badly things would go. And I figured out pretty early on that it was pretty much impossible for me to have a full course load, that I needed to focus on 1 or 2 college courses at a time. So going part-time, dropping out, making money, and then going back in, and of course moving around, so having to get credits transferred and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really complicated situation that I was in. And so one of the things that happened is, so how did I pay for college? So I wanted to go into this. So one of the ways I paid was what other people would probably call mooching off of relatives, which is not them paying for college directly, but me having a place to stay that I didn't actually pay for. But in my family, this was not really considered mooching off of relatives, at least not very much. So my family has a ton of people in it. So on my mother's side, when I'd go to family reunions there were usually hundreds of people. On my father's side, go to family reunions there, usually hundreds of people on that side too. So, in the early 80s, when I was a young child, it would be, more like 200 or 300. And then into the 90s and aughts, oh yeah, it would get really huge, so huge. I mean, we had to rent such big places for family reunions, And we had like small gatherings that weren't even official reunions. It would be like 50 to 100 people. And that was not even considered a real family reunion. That was just a small gathering. So I had a lot of relatives. And one of the things that I saw when I was in my childhood, is that some relatives would just move around from one relative to another, because generally you could stay at least 2 weeks at someone's place that was a relative, and before they'd start getting irritated with you and say, okay, you're not a house guest anymore, you need to move out. And so, yeah, I remember one cousin that he had figured out that he could stay a week or two at every relative and every relative's family, and just continuously do that. And he did that for I think it was about a year and a half one time, and then another time he was doing it as well. And it wasn't really considered mooching, even if you stayed for months. Like if you found relatives that you were they were irritated by you, they wouldn't let you stay longer than a couple weeks. But if they liked you, they'd let you stay for months or maybe even years. And so I knew relatives that stayed with other relatives for years and never paid them rent. And that was considered both on my mother's side and my father's side. And that was considered a tradition that relatives do not pay rent. Now, you are expected to contribute. For example, like a lot of these were farms, and you were expected to do farm work. If they had a family business, you were expected to work at the family business. So it wasn't... It wasn't like lazy mooching. You were definitely doing a lot of chores and stuff. But it was also considered that family doesn't charge family rent. Like both on my mother's side and on my father's side, they considered that really bizarre. So after I ran away from home, I was going around mostly with cousins, sometimes grandparents, and there were some places that I really liked and returned to repeatedly. Like my favorite place to go to with my cousins, a relative will call him, we'll call him Uncle George. So actually my great uncle, even though we called him Uncle George. And so and this was in the 1980s. I counted his descendants, and he had 70 descendants in the 1980s. So one great uncle, 70 descendants. So he was my grandfather's older brother, so my mother's father's brother. And that particular grandfather, he had, we don't even know, but we think he had around 30 brothers and sisters, and mostly half, because his father was a Civil War guy, and he was elderly when my grandfather was born. So he just, whenever one wife would pass away, he'd just marry a new young wife and keep having kids. So we really believe that there were about 30 of them, possibly even more. And that particular grandfather, he had brothers and sisters that were 40 years older than he was. Yeah, 40 years older. So anyways, my great uncle George, that I'm calling him that name, that's a fake name, of course. So he had this farm. There were 2 houses on the farm, and I think about 7 garages, and then a bunch of farm buildings, some of which were in terrible disrepair and have since been knocked down. And so there were 2 houses on this farm, and usually there were anywhere from 15 to 30 people living in these 2 houses. And that was my favorite place to go. I would go and I would live with those cousins, and that was really cool. And I was one of the very few that would live there that was not a direct descendant of Uncle George. And so that was a really good place to go to. And there were two houses, and one of them I never lived in, because that was the house where around 100 cats lived. And thankfully they were indoor-outdoor cats, but the house really smelled bad, and I did not like to be in that house. And the other house was the one where cats were not allowed. And even though I like cats, I did not want to be around that much stink. And so the other one was where I would live, and I would usually have a little room in the basement when I would live in that house. So that was one of the ways I was able to build up money for college, is by not paying rent living with relatives. And so another thing that I did was, and this is a story that I told in another video, is that my mother did pay for some of my college. So we've had a very difficult relationship, and I actually have a video where I summarize some of the very basic things about my relationship with myself and my mother and my stepfather that my mother remarried afterwards. So that other video is called "Why My Mom Kept Getting Smallpox." And yeah, that's a weird title for a video. It's because my mother had a lot of compulsive lying problems, and that's one of the things she would lie about, that pretending to get smallpox. And yeah, it was really embarrassing. So she was really horrible to me in a lot of ways, but she was also really great to me in a lot of ways. And we had a difficult relationship, a lot of breaking of the relationship and healing of the relationship, and breaking and healing over and over again. But one of the things that she did, and I talk about it in that video, is she paid for some of my college, just a little bit of it, but it was pretty expensive. She put a lot of money towards this, and as I tell in that other video, what she did, which I was so upset with her for doing this, and I stopped taking her money. I would not take her money once I found out. So she destroyed her face. She destroyed her face for me. It's one of the really heroic things that my mother did for me that I wish she had not done. But anyway, so let me give you a little bit of context. So on my mother's side of the family, there's some relatives that don't age very much. I mean, they obviously do age, but not very much. For example, her grandmother, my great-grandmother, she was in her 80s and looked like she was in her 50s, and a good 50 at that. So really super young looking. And that great-grandmother, her hair didn't even start to go gray, like the little tiny sprinkles of gray that happen when you first start growing gray. Her hair didn't even start to go gray until her late 80s. She was really super young looking. And my mother had it too. She looked like a teenager till she was nearly 40. And people would have such extreme reactions to my mother when they'd be introduced to her and to us kids at the same time, because people would say, they would be like, okay, here's this like, obviously like a 16-year-old girl, and she's got like a 10-year-old daughter. Why? And they'd be really shocked, and they'd think that she must have married an older man who'd already, had kids with another wife or something like that. And no, she had not. She was my biological mother, and he was my biological father. And people would be so shocked that she looked young. They would not believe her. they would be like, you're obviously, and she'd be like, no, I'm not 16, I'm 30, you know. And so that's the kind of thing that would happen a lot. And my mother was really beautiful and really young looking. And when she decided to pay for my college, there was this factory, and there was a vat of chemicals, and it was against the law for people to work above this vat, but it was very lucrative to do so. And the company kept getting in legal trouble for having workers working above this vat. But if you would do it and you would shut your mouth and not turn in the company, you could make a lot of money. And that's what my mother did to pay for just a tiny bit of my college, just a tiny bit. And it destroyed her looks in a very short time period, being above that vat of chemicals. She just, she aged 20 years in such a short time period. It was awful. And I was really upset about it. I did not want her to destroy her beauty, destroy her face for me, and not even for my entire college, but for just a little bit of my college. And so another way I paid for it was getting student loans. And I'll get into that in detail a little bit later. So that has a lot to do with the way the affirmative action was actually harming me instead of helping me. But first, I did want to say one other thing that happened that to pay for my college, and I haven't revealed this in any other video, and that was, I think. So after my mom stopped paying for my college, there was another relative. And I'm going to be very cagey about exactly who this is. I'm going to call her Cousin Carol. Cousin Carol, she said, I'll pay for your college. I'll pay for it. And so I was like, yeah, you'll pay for it. You know, I don't like taking money from my mom. I don't want to take out these loans. Okay, you'll pay for it. But the problem was that I became increasingly convinced over time that it was probably blackmail money. I was like, I kept thinking to myself as I found out more and more about the situation, I became more and more convinced that, I think this is blackmail money. I think it's blackmail money. And Cousin Carol, and of course that's a fake name, so she was telling me, okay, so this money that I'm giving you and paying for your college, this is not actually my money. I'm getting it from these three other relatives. And these three other relatives, and I'm not going to say who they were, they're sending the money through Carol to me to pay for my college. And why are they doing that? I never spoke to them directly about it. I just spoke to Carol about it. But what she said is that the only thing I had to do in order to receive the money is I had to stop complaining about these three people. So I had complained for years about things that they had done, not anything illegal that they'd done, but, you know, some pretty bad unethical things that they had done. So I'd been complaining about that for years, and she said, well, if you stop complaining, then you can get the money for as long as you need, and all your college will be paid for. And it seemed like a good deal. And I was like, well, I'm not going to lie about it, you know. And she's like, no, you don't have to lie. Just stop talking about it. Stop your complaining. And if people ask you about it specifically, just say, well, I don't talk about that anymore. So no lying involved, and just to stop talking about stuff. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. But I got these really bad feelings about it the longer it went on. I kept thinking to myself, like like, isn't this blackmail? Like, isn't it? Isn't it blackmail? And it really didn't sit right with me. And I know there's a lot of things that go on these days with things like non-disclosure agreements, where people agree to stop complaining about stuff in return for money. So, maybe it's something like that. It's like, oh, you stop complaining and you get money for stopping your complaints. But I think a lot of that stuff that goes on is not really right either. And I think it is similar to blackmail. Like, maybe it's not legally blackmail, but it's very similar to blackmail. And I remember the feelings I had about paying for college with this, what I kept thinking of as blackmail money, although maybe technically it wasn't. The feelings I had about this just got worse and worse. And I remember at one point, I'd been assigned the lottery, because when you got this many relatives, you got to have like a lottery for who you give Christmas presents to. So I'd been assigned one of these people on the lottery to get a Christmas present. And for this person that I was, possibly blackmailing, or, an accessory to blackmail at least. And I tried to shop for the Christmas present. I absolutely could not buy it. Like, I was in the store, I could not buy it. I knew what I wanted to buy, I could not buy it. And I just thought, it's so awful to like blackmail someone and then buy them a Christmas present. It just seemed, it seemed so awful. And I could never manage to buy that Christmas present. But that was the last straw. I was like, okay, if I feel this weirdly about it and I can't even buy them a Christmas present, I'm pretty sure it's blackmail. Even if it's not blackmail in a legal sense, it's blackmail in an ethical sense. So I stopped taking that money. And then I went into student loans, and so there was the program back then that they just started up, where if you have, so they tell me, yeah, you can get the loans, so they tell me, you can go ahead and you can pay for college, and with these loans, and if for some reason you're not able to get a high-paying job that allows you to pay off the loans, then you can get them discharged in 20 years. And I was like, well, I guess that's a good idea, to get them discharged in 20 years. But they told me that you will absolutely be able to get that high-paying job. And this is where the part about affirmative action comes in. So being a woman, and a disabled woman at that, I was told that there would be these high-paying jobs waiting for me. And I was also told that that there would be a lot of scholarships for me to pay for college. Yeah, you might be wondering, why weren't the scholarships there? So I'm going to cover these two topics, loans and scholarships to pay for college. And both of them are kind of related. And for both of them, I think that I was really harmed by the affirmative action that I was told over and over again was going to help me with this. So basically, when I would talk to college advisors or people working in the financial aid office, or other various authority figures, like sometimes, the dean or something like that, I would hear this story. They'd have the same like paradigm that they were all had bought into. And that was the idea that really smart women need to be given like a free ride or an easy ride through college, And then I was basically told that because I'm a woman, and because I'm really smart, and because I'm really interested in, the hard sciences and math and engineering, I was told that there would be men who would basically be pushed aside to make room for me, to make sure that I could absolutely get that really high paying job after college. And the way it wasn't quite put in terms exactly that brutal, but it was sort of described more softly. And basically what people would say is that, oh, these men that would be pushed aside for me, they would be only slightly smarter than me. They wouldn't be like hugely smarter than me. And also there's so many things, so many factors that go into who gets hired and who doesn't get hired. There's a lot of random stuff that causes, slightly less smart people to get hired for jobs when much smarter people should have been, or whatever. So I got told, well, there's a lot of randomness involved in the system. And I also got told that there's a lot of discrimination against women in particular, somewhat against disabled people, but against women in particular, who want to go into these jobs where you've got to be really smart to get the college degree. So, and I was also told, from even before I started college, I was told that as a smart woman who was interested in math and science, that I would have the road to college just made very easy for me. That and in some of the classes, depending on what major I was in, I switched major a bunch of times because I had such a hard time with my brain damage going forward that sometimes I had to switch majors. I was like, okay, this one doesn't work, I'll switch to another one. But people, they overpraised me, and they made me believe that I would be given all these things. And because they told me I would be given all these things and I would have that high paying job after college, I way overspent on college. And I think I'm sort of going to go ahead to the point where, before I go into all the details, but I think that the point that I should have been at was they should have just told me, hey, Penny, your college is not working. You keep switching majors, you keep dropping classes, or withdrawing soon enough to get your money back sometimes, and your grade point average, you have a horrible time keeping it up. And I'd have to sometimes take super easy classes that weren't even required for my major, just to sort of push up my grade point average a little bit. And they should have told me that I wasn't college material. Instead of saying, oh, you're a smart woman, you're so in demand, you'll be helped, they should have just told me, Penny, you're not college material. You got this brain damage. You can't seem to function even when you get these accommodations. They should have just told me, don't pour all your money into college. And the scholarships that everyone said that I was going to get, like there were so many people that said, as a really smart woman who's interested in science and math, you're just going to get so many scholarships. You won't even have to get the loans. You'll get the scholarships. And I did look into it, and I tried to get help on it, but there were a bunch of problems. For one thing, you can't just, a lot of these scholarships, they have grade point average requirements, and for a lot of them, I couldn't meet that. And so that was a problem. Like, you can't just be smart, you have to prove that you're smart with the grade point average. And if it doesn't matter if you have some professors that praise you. I mean, they can write letters of recommendation to overcome the grade point average problem to some extent. But and also some of them would be really iffy about me, because they'd be like, okay, so I recommended that Penny was so smart that she should take, this particular graduate course while she was an undergrad. And she did really good in that course for like half of it and got a lot of praise. And then for the second half, she just flunked every single exam. And so they were kind of iffy about writing me letters of recommendation, and I didn't want to really press them for it, because, remember, I'd have extremely random and variable performance in school. I would do things and say things in class and sort of jump ahead in the material in ways that I would get big praise for, but I would also do terrible work, like projects that I either wouldn't turn in, or if I did turn them in, they would think I was trolling them. It was such a bad and poor project. And so that was one problem. Another problem was that a lot of these scholarships had these like pledges or whatever, I guess, that you were supposed to sign, that you would graduate college in a certain amount of time, or you would keep your grade point average above a certain level, and if you didn't do that, you had to give back the money. And so there were a bunch of scholarships that had requirements like that on it, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sign this agreement, because I know, either that it's going to be really hard to keep my grade point average up, or it's going to be really hard to graduate college on time, because I'm mostly doing like 1 or 2 courses at a time. And so I felt like I couldn't sign those pledges. And years later, other people told me, oh, well, everyone just signs those pledges and lies on it, because they either never ask you for the money back, or if they try to get it, they're unable to get it, and they don't ever bother taking you to court. You just lie on the pledge, and then just do whatever you want with the scholarship money. And of course, even if I'd known that was, what I was quote unquote supposed to do early on, I wouldn't have done it, because I really, really hate lying. I do not like to be forced to lie, and I really hate it. So yeah, I did not get those scholarships that they said would come in. But I was convinced to get a lot of these loans, even though I wasn't really college material. They should have told me to, I don't know, become a plumber or something. So I ended up, so I would pour huge amounts of my money into college because of all these hype talks I got, these affirmative action inspired hype talks. So I poured over this approximately 15-year period, I poured all of my money into college. Like, I would save up money, go to college, spend it all on college, also get loans that were really burdensome, and I would pay on the loans when I was out of college and also after I graduated. And there were a lot of points which I was poor enough that I really should have put the loans on a payment plan where I didn't have to pay anything or hardly anything, because I was so poor, just get a really tiny payment plan. But a lot of times I would not put them on deferment, and I would keep paying on them because I felt like I had to, and it was the right thing to do. And so even though I eventually got my loans forgiven, during the Joe Biden era, and I wasn't, one of those that, I think there's a lot, people that get their loans forgiven, they get a lot of flack about it. And in my case, I paid in well more than the original loan amounts. Even though they were forgiven, the stuff that was forgiven, that was all interest. That was all interest. I paid back my loans. So even though I got them forgiven, it was still a huge amount of money that I put in there that I'll never get back. And people convinced me to do it because they were all on the same page. They all had the same script about this affirmative action stuff, where they just couldn't see past the fact that I was a smart woman interested in math and science and engineering. They could not see past that. They just, and they, I don't think any of them were malicious. They were actually trying to help me. And I just think they had the wrong idea. They were indoctrinated in the wrong ideas. And there's a lot of things that I could have done during that time. And so anyways, I keep calling it affirmative action when nowadays it's called diversity or DEI, but it was called affirmative action back then. So I just wanted to give you the really tiny summary here of the history. So JFK and LBJ, American presidents, they started and then further developed the Equal Employment Opportunity, which in 1967, before I was born, included women in it. And affirmative action was the name of the tool that was used for equal employment opportunity. So the idea was that women would have equal opportunities to men, and the idea was that that women were discriminated against a lot when they tried to go into male fields, which I do believe was the case. Women were discriminated against a lot, when they tried to go into male fields. So back then, women who wanted careers, they were mostly funneled into just a few jobs like, secretary, nurse, school teacher, librarian, and just a few others. And it was really hard for women to have a career in anything that wasn't in those fields. But smart women were almost exclusively funneled into school teacher, for below the college level. So, elementary school, middle school, junior high, and high school. So smart women were almost entirely funneled into those jobs. And they were quite pressured to go into those jobs and quite pressured to not go into the fields that smart men were going into. And there are fewer smart women than men. It's just biology. It's bell curves and stuff like that. There's also a lot more stupid men than there are stupid women, because men tend to be further from the average. They tend to be smarter or stupider, whereas women tend to be more average. But there are fewer smart women than there are men. But I think that smart women are very important to society. And even in the 1980s, they talked about how the equal employment opportunity and affirmative action was changing society, because there were these teachers. I remember them. There were these very old teachers that were retiring that everyone talked about in the 1980s. And some of these teachers were actually, like around 80 years old in the 1980s. So they'd been born around the turn of the century, and when, in the era when smart women were always pushed to be a school teacher if they wanted a career. And these smart women, they were really instrumental in making America great. And people would talk about how awesome these really smart school teachers were, and how instrumental they were in raising up the next generation of smart children. And I think that this attitude where they would steer everyone away from school teacher, they'd be like, oh, school teacher isn't a real job for a smart woman. That's just glorified babysitting. Well, it is now, but it wasn't, back then before the 80s, and in the 80s it was already eroding pretty badly. They were just pushing smart women into everything else, but I think it affected the children, because smart children really need smart school teachers, and they need to encounter them before the college level. They need to encounter them when they're young. And there are a few smart men who go into school teaching at that level, but not very many. And there are mostly ordinary men go into that, or, average intelligent men. And the children, they need some really smart women to help them. And I think when society decided to move all of these smart women out of school teaching, they damaged generations of children, and not just the smart boys, but also the smart girls. The smart girls that needed to develop into the next generation of smart school teachers were also damaged by this. It's hard, and our school system is in a bad situation. And what I ended up doing with my college is I stopped listening to these people that kept telling me that as my student debt kept growing and growing, oh, you'll get such a high-paying job and you'll be able to pay it off very quickly. I stopped believing them. I stopped it. And I just got a little nothing degree because, to go to college that long and not even have a bachelor's degree is just garbage. And I was like, okay, I should have done this to begin with. I should have just gotten some little nothing degree. So yeah, I got a little nothing degree and graduated just so that I could say, okay, I've got a bachelor's degree now, which, these days is pretty much the same value as a high school graduation used to be back in the 1980s. So yeah, that's what I did. And I'm not a school teacher, but I think that people should have been pushing people like me into school teaching. And now I probably would not have made a good school teacher for a bunch of reasons, including that, I'm not really that into it. And also the way that the schools changed, smart women like me would have been forced to teach the wrong things to children and deal with all kinds of other garbage, and it would have been hard on me, and I would have just quit. So maybe in some other world I could have been a school teacher, but not in this world. But I am thinking that there were other things that I could have done that people that pushed the affirmative action attitude towards me robbed from me, and I think unknowingly, because I think that they were meaning well. They wanted to help me. They overpraised me, and because of my brain damage, it's like I'm still smart, but my smartness doesn't function the same way, and I wasn't really capable of graduating from college in any hard science or math or anything like that kind of degree. I just wasn't capable of it. And I should have been told that early on, but instead they were so worked up about, oh, here's a smart woman, let's push her into the high paid career path, and let's promise her that affirmative action will make a way for her, and she'll get that easy job. And no, she shouldn't pay any attention to the growing debt, and no, she shouldn't worry about all of her money being poured into college for around a decade and a half. And then after college being poured into the student debt. She shouldn't worry about that. She should just go forward. That's the attitude. So it wasn't really affirmative action, so I didn't get affirmative action exactly. I got affirmative attitude. I got that overpraise. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sometimes leery of people praising me. Some people say I'm humble, but it's not so much that I'm humble, but that I'm suspicious, because I have been damaged by overpraise. I've been basically tricked into doing things that are very harmful to me because I was overpraised. And what it is that I just, and there were other things. So if I had had that money, if I hadn't been pouring it into college for so long, what could I have done? Well, I could have invested and established a pretty good retirement fund. There were points at which, like for example, when I was when the .com crash happened and everyone was saying, "Hey, buy stocks after the .com crash." What if I'd invested all that college money into buying after the crash? I was actually thinking about it. I didn't buy a single stock. But I was thinking about it, and I know people in my generation, Generation X, who did that and got very nice retirement funds set up for themselves. So maybe I could have done that. I could have been working at a job that actually made me good money, like a plumber or something, and that I actually could function at. I could have been making that kind of money. Another thing is I could have like bought a house like everyone was saying after that the 2008-2009 housing crash. Everyone was saying, "Hey, now's the time to buy." What if I'd had enough money to buy a house at that point and I'd bought one? That would have been a really good investment. What about cryptocurrency? I haven't bought any cryptocurrency. I have none right now. But I remember when cryptocurrency was pretty small, I was thinking to myself, maybe I should buy a little bit of this. But I didn't. I had student loans to pay into. But what if I'd had some money to put into it back then? And what if I hadn't had student loans that I was still paying off? I know a lot of people that put money into it at the right time and then they became, a cryptocurrency millionaire. What if that had happened? So there's a lot of things I might have done with my money. And then there's also other things. I am in my early 50s. I'm old enough to be a grandmother to a baby or a toddler. I without any weird shenanigans going on. I could be a grandmother right now, but I never had children, and I, because of my brain damage and my chaotic life, I would not have been able to have children at 20 or 25. But by 30, if I hadn't been dealing with all this college garbage, by 30, I might have been. And I'm not sure if I would have chosen to have children, but I might have. That's another path in life that was closed off to me by pouring all my money into these stupid student loans. That path was closed off to me. I could, if I'd had a child at 30 and then that child had their own child at 20, I could be a grandmother to a very young child right now. And there's some people that are saying to me, oh Penny, you can adopt at this point in your life. You can still do it. I don't think so. I've seen older parents try to raise kids, and it's not good for the kids. So if you're sitting there trying to convince me that I can adopt kids right now, no, I can't. And I don't know if I would have chosen to have kids, but there were a bunch of things that were closed off to me. So closed off to me because I was overhyped. Because affirmative action and what they now call it DEI. So I've seen a lot of people criticizing it for various reasons, and one of the things they say is that affirmative action, the way it was marketed and promoted to the public in general, was that it would help Black people. and a few other groups, but mostly it was promoted as, oh, this will help Black people. But what it actually ended up doing was it helped white women more than any other group. So I'm a white woman, and I'm part of the group that affirmative action helped more than any other group. But I don't think it actually helped me because it was overhyped and it was basically just used as a tool to extract vast amounts of money from me, waste a lot of my time, and divert my path from possible paths that I might have chosen to walk. There are possible paths I might have chosen to walk that I did not choose because I was preoccupied with college or I was burdened by paying off student loan debt. And that's not something that's unique to me as a brain damaged person. I know that other people have been put off track in their life by it too. So it's not just me; it's other people. But I really think all those advisors, the financial aid office people, there was a dean or two in there too. There were some other people that gave me all this advice. They should have realized that my grade point average and the way that I would flunk courses or withdraw or, all this stuff, and the way that I couldn't function most of the time unless I only took one or two classes at a time, they should have realized that that meant that my brain damage was at a level where I basically wasn't college material. Or if I was, I needed to get one of those little nothing degrees as quickly and cheaply as possible and then just move on to the world of work. But they convinced me that no, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't give up. I needed to be the smart woman who goes into math, science, the hard sciences, or engineering. That's what they convinced me. And they were wrong. And I don't think they were malicious. They were just all indoctrinated in the same ideas, and they were trying to help me. But I was very harmed by it. I was very harmed. Okay, so that's been quite a long while. I've been rambling about that. And I think I've basically said everything that I need to say. There's a lot more detail I could go into, but I think most of it would be rambling detail. So that's it. So that's about my brain damage part 3 school. I think there will probably be a part 4, but it's the topic that I would cover in it would be a pretty short topic. And I'm not sure if there'll be any parts after that. So probably just this part and part 4. And thank you for listening to this very personal story that I have slightly fictionalized in order to present it to you. Thank you.